Here's another very common area that clients ask about or people are concerned about: estate planning, creating a will, a trust, powers of attorney. Basically, what's going to happen to my assets or my things? I want them to go to my kids if something happens to me, or a power of attorney, a living will is basically, okay, if something happens to me, I haven't died, but I'm, not able to answer questions. I'm basically in a coma in the hospital. I need somebody to make decisions about my healthcare or my financial needs. So those are different types of powers of attorney. Now, just like in the section on contracts, I talk about templates online that you find, and there's a list in the resources in this course that talk about some of the online resources for templates that you can find that are samples. Um, Always do your research. And if you want to talk to an attorney, you should in your local area, just to get an idea. Okay, am I missing something here? Because a lot of times it comes down to people don't really understand the impact. It's like, yeah, I can go online and get a will. I can get a free one online on some template, fill it out, get it signed, and then I'm done, right? I'm protected. Well, you may not understand and have researched to understand that a will is basically a document that transfers your assets maybe to your kids, but each state has their own requirements. So if you're in a certain state, you may have been required to get, most of the time, it's like a couple signatures of witnesses that saw you sign the will. Did you get those witnesses to sign? Or is it something that had to be notarized? Now, even when you have a will in most states, you still have to go to court to what's called probate the will. So if you get a will and you think you're covered, you might be covered, but you still have to go through a process of taking that will and probating it in most cases. And some states like California, it can take a minimum is 18 months to probate a will. And you're talking even a very basic estate, at least $10,000 to $30,000 in attorney's fees that are automatically provided. So once you end up in probate court, you almost have to have an attorney. And by law, they have a plug in the number, and that's how much you have to pay your attorney, and it's automatic. So, and that's just in the state of California. Each state is different, but generally a will cover the transfer of your assets to, let's say, your kids or whoever you designate. But most of the time you have to go to court to enforce that will, basically. And if you do your research, you'll see that a living trust does the same effect, but you don't have to take it to court and go through a probate process. So hiring an attorney for an estate planning is somebody who can basically tell you these different types of, okay, instead of getting a will, maybe we should do a living trust instead. So that way we don't have to spend time and money in probate court. So it's that kind of advice on, am I doing this right? Not necessarily, is this form of will okay to use? Does it accomplish what I need? Maybe it accomplishes what you need, but it might not be necessarily the best for your situation. Also, larger estates, there's certain tax issues that you have to look at: tax planning, financial planning, not just preparing a will. So these are the more complex things. So if you have a decent sized estate, a couple $1 million in assets, you should really be talking to your tax person and financial planning person about how to structure your estate plan. And then you can take it to an attorney and say, hey, here are my concerns about taxes or whatever it is to plan for, and have an attorney prepare an estate plan that basically follows those. If you have a small estate, you don't have a lot of assets, maybe under $1 million or so, a standard living trust online might be okay for you. And I would find it based on your state where you're located. And, so the pros are, it's either free or very low cost to get a template for a will or a trust online, or a power of attorney. A lot of times each state may have a statutory form for a durable power of attorney you can download for free. Usually those have to be notarized, but they're very basic forms you can fill in yourself. Do those work? If you've done it properly, yes. There may be issues you're not thinking about, but does it cover what you need? Probably. I can't say for sure. So when it comes to a very basic power of attorney, standardized forms are probably fine. A living trust or a will, something you find online might be okay. Just understanding, research the law on this in your state and figuring out, okay, what is best? Should I have a will? Should I have a trust? Should I have a pour over will that pours over into my trust? What type of trust do I have? There's a lot of questions that you need to figure out before you say, I just need to go get a will. So it's really understanding the process before deciding whether you need to hire someone to do it or if it's something you might be able to do yourself. AI is starting to develop now to where it can prepare some of these documents too. So that's what I would say is research your state that you're in, the estate planning or probate laws and trust laws to try to figure out, what do I need? Should I get a trust or a will? What about powers of attorney? Are there standardized ones I can use? Or should I really, I've got a couple million in assets and there's some tax issues and I want to make sure my kids don't have to pay. I want to transfer my business. That's starting to get a little bit more complex where you should probably be talking to an attorney. They're probably going to charge you hourly, $250 to $600 an hour to help you figure this out. Some attorneys also do a flat fee. So if you go to them and say, hey, I want a standard estate planning package, it might be $3,000. That might come with the full living trust prepared for you, pour over will, all your powers of attorney, transferring title of your assets into the name of the trust. And that's one of the things that gets missed is people will come in and say, oh yeah, I already did my will or I did my trust. Let's say they did a living trust, they did it themselves. And then the person dies and they're like, okay, well, we already have this trust here, so we're good. And then you look into it and it's like, well, to do a trust, you have to fund the trust. You have to put assets into the name of the trust, meaning your primary residence, your home. Usually you have to do some kind of a deed that gets recorded with the county that says, I'm transferring this from my personal name into XYZ family trust. If you haven't done that by the time the person dies, or you die, if it's your trust, then you usually end up having to go to probate court anyways. So you've defeated the purpose. So you have to make sure all the steps are followed in not just getting a trust, but funding the trust and anything else along the way. So that's just, my advice is to understand the process for your state, figure out what's best for you. And if it seems like you have a lot of different assets, there's some complicated issues, you should really talk to not just a tax person, but also an estate planning attorney to figure out what the best option is and get some quotes and then say, okay, well, I don't want to spend that much, or I'll try to do it myself with the understanding that there could be some risks that you're not doing it properly. So generally, smaller estates, probably okay for powers of attorney and basic trusts, maybe a will, but basically make sure you educate yourself on the process before you decide to do that.